Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you by Growmark FS. Keeping up on the latest in ag is a challenge to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic grain and energy solutions born of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk here on this Friday, June 3rd. Great to have you with us once again. Thank you for making us part of your day. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Find us online. MarketTalkAg.com is our home on the web. MarketTalkAg.com. Find all of our streaming sources, radio affiliates, and much more there online. Well, we had another interesting day, we'll call it that, in the market trade today. A lot of pressure in soybeans and in winter wheat, while corn held firm to wrap up the week. Let's talk about all of it. Let's say good afternoon to our good friend Ted Seifried with Zaner Ag Hedge. Ted, good afternoon, sir. And what a wild week this has been in the market trade overall.
Yeah, sometimes the short weeks are the wildest weeks, Jesse. That was definitely the case this week. Wow, you had a precipitous drop in corn, so that was something, and not a real solid recovery there late in the week. And in the meantime, you had a soybean market that is extremely conflicted. A big move to the downside in sympathy with corn on the first trading day of the week on Tuesday. Even though it had tried to go higher overnight and put in a big key reversal. But then we didn't see follow through to the downside. Big update there on Thursday, and then followed by another bigger down day on Friday, which, by the way, was really just an inside trading day. But either way, it's just not great to see, beans down 31.5, not able to follow through on the strength that we saw on Thursday. And even when you look at the products, Jesse, July soybean oil up 41. While meal down 7. You've got a soybean oil chart now that looks like it really wants to break out to the upside. And you've got a soybean meal chart that really looks like it wants to break out to the downside. So I think today or actually this entire week, Jesse, I think left us with more questions than answers. You got a lot of conflict going on. And, looking at the corn market and the big drop that we saw there, really tied into planting progress being better than expected. The idea that, maybe Russia is going to allow some exports from Ukrainian grain, or they're going to clear a pathway and stop attacking cargo vessels. Culminating with Friday and Vladimir Putin saying, we're not stopping Ukrainian grain shipments. They can still export 5 million metric tons of wheat and 7 million metric tons of corn. Okay. But if and when that's going to happen, why isn't it happening now is really the question. So we're chasing headlines. That's definitely something that, has been a thing for a while and will continue to do that. But in the meantime, you've got, guys in the Dakotas that are just really struggling to get planted. And I think a lot of that acreage for corn's not going to get in. I don't think a whole lot of it's actually going to switch to soybeans either. It's just really going to go prevent plant. And then you've got a lot of people, a lot of reports, widespread, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, even Iowa, saying, hey, our emergence is really bad. We're having to come in and replant. That's been a little bit more of a problem I've heard for soybeans than corn, but in both places. So on the production side of things, you have some pretty significant issues that are bubbling up. But those aren't the things that we're focused on, or at least we weren't this week. We will see if that shift happens next week, if we turn our attention to that a little bit more. But again, you've got a whole lot of conflicting factors, Jesse, and we've talked at length. You and I have talked at length about how there is a bigger gorilla in the room here. And you look at the corn balance sheet with about let's just call it a 1.4 billion bushel carryover for this year and next projected. And you say, hey, that's pretty bullish. That probably justifies $5.50, maybe $6 corn, but maybe not $6.90 December corn and $7 plus old crop corn. A lot of that pricing, you have to understand, is part of this inflationary climate that we're in. And in the last few weeks, we've really been going back and forth on whether this inflationary bubble is bursting at this point. I do think, and I've said many times, that inflationary bubble will burst. And when it does, it's going to be a nasty thing for commodities, for the stock market, really for everything. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, hey, grain fundamentals are as bullish, if not more bullish than they were, a few weeks ago, or then a few weeks ago, yet we're sharply lower. Well, again, there's this outside market, this inflationary component. So it really makes me wonder if that's what we were seeing this week. And I take pause because I've been wanting to say that I don't think that inflationary bubble bursts until mid to late summer into fall and possibly winter. But the market this past couple of weeks have made me really question that. However, you go and you look at crude oil, and they're on Friday up almost $3, challenging that 120 mark. And you say, I don't know if this inflationary bubble has burst just yet. I really do get the feeling that people are going to go out and consume rather aggressively here for over the course of the next 1.5 to 2 months. And then I really worry about that inflationary bubble bursting. But for right now, you look at crude, you look at gasoline demand, gasoline consumption, it is down 7% from the 5-year average. However, considering the prices that we're paying at the pump, which are way more than 7% over what the 5-year average is, that's not a sharp enough reduction, in my opinion, Jesse, to say that high prices are causing demand destruction at this point, at least not to a significant enough level to really offset the tight balance sheets that we have really commodity wide, energies and grains in particular. So again, I try to take this whole week in and look at it as one big picture. I think corn was due and needed a bit of a correction. I like the fact that we were able to hold some very key support in the form of our 100-day moving average. We didn't have a significant bounce off of it, at least not this week. But I look at the problems that we're having on the supply side of things, on the production side of things, and I look at the strength that we're seeing in crude oil, and I look at the RFS news was pretty mixed on Friday, but overall, I think demand for ethanol is going to be really strong. Demand for biodiesel is going to be really strong. I don't think we're done with this. I think this week has scared a lot of people in feeling like the story is over. Maybe not just in grains, maybe in commodities as a whole. But I'm not so sure. I'm really skeptical about that. And now I'm watching it very closely, and I really want to stress the same idea we've been stressing basically for the last few months is, look, we're at great prices. Producers need to be making cash sales in order to protect their downside risk. But I'm also not giving up on my long positions here. I really do feel like having call spreads on going out through July and August is the right thing to do because, generally multi-year bull markets don't end in a whimper. They end in a spectacular fashion of some sort of train wreck. We haven't seen that yet. And watching crude, we haven't seen that yet. So again, Jesse, I really do think that we have to be cognizant about the prices that we're at, manage that risk. Weeks like this make us feel good about being 65% sold in new crop corn at this point. But also, I think you really want to keep that upside open. I don't think you give up hope on the idea that, hey, maybe things get a little bit spicier again before we say, hey, that's, the party's over. I'm not feeling like the party's over quite yet.
Well, to unpack a few of the things you talked about there, Ted, I know going into next week, it's another pivotal week. We got that crop progress report on Monday. And as you
Yeah.
alluded to, the weather challenges in the Northwestern belt. How many prevent plant acres are we going to see? That is a big question right now. Will farmers try to seed some of it to soybeans or canola or something else, or will it just be left and walk away? That's a big thing. But then next Friday, we got the WASDE report out for this month. So another big week shaping up ahead of us here in the markets. And, you mentioned corn a little bit too. Fairly firm today, although not a big rally off the 100-day moving averages. But one has to wonder if we break through some of those averages next week, how much air is under that corn market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if we do take out the low that we had from the weekly low, this weekly low, yeah, I mean, there's another 40 to 60 cents of downside potential there for the corn, minimally. I mean, look, when we're at these elevated prices, corrections can be big and nasty, and again, at some point the party is over. But like I said, I am rather skeptical that is going to be the case, especially with crude doing what it's doing. Energies are still a big thing, and that's a big part of the ethanol or the corn balance. Ethanol is a big part of the corn balance sheet. So yeah, we're treading some thin ice, Jesse. To your point, and to go back to the crop progress that we are going to be looking at on Monday afternoon. The trade is, I don't think, very well versed at reading those things, because when we look at crop progress and percentage of planted, percentage of intended acres planted, that doesn't necessarily mean those acres have gotten planted. That just means that we're not going to do anything further with those acres as far as planting is concerned. Meaning, we might have already decided that those are going to PP, or getting switched to soybeans. So we're moving past that. So it's a little bit convoluted when you look at planting progress numbers. Now, the other thing that we're going to see on Monday is going to be crop conditions for corn. And if you'd asked me a week ago if we would have seen those last, well, not Monday, but Tuesday afternoon because of the holiday, I would have put this corn crop, at a pretty high, good to excellent, historically, not a high historically, but towards the higher end. But with all the replant issues that we're hearing about and things like that, now I'm starting to lean towards maybe the crop conditions not being as great as what we were originally expecting. I'm wondering if, instead of 70 or 72% good excellent, we're maybe in like the 58-ish area, or low 60s. And if that's the case, that might really spark the conversation about, hey, production issues, lost acreage, is this 177 national average yield attainable, and so on and so forth. So we'll see. I'm very curious. Like you said, lots of data, lots of information coming out next week that'll bring us back to the balance sheets, bring us back to those grain fundamentals of supply and production and things like that.
Livestock markets, Ted, we're officially in the summer grilling season now. We're past Memorial Day weekend. You look at the cattle and hog markets this week, I mean, kind of a mixed bag, I would say. Export sales were all right today. But what are your thoughts in cattle and hogs here as we get into the month of June and wrap up this holiday shortened week?
Yeah, kind of decent sales to China, for both pork and beef. That was nice to see. Yeah, Jesse, I mean, there's been a lot of doubters about domestic demand for proteins. Are we going to go to the grocers and pay up for meat when we're paying so much at the pump, and when the stock market is looking really shaky? And everybody, including Elon Musk, is talking about the possibility or probability of a recession, or so on and so forth. So that makes analysts really worried about what domestic demand will be. But I've contended, and we've talked at length about, I think we're really gonna party like it's 1999 here for a little while, Jesse. I think people want to get out and spend time with friends and grill and do those sorts of activities, and we'll worry about our wallets a little bit later on. And I think when that time comes, things will be bad. But for right now, I think that domestic demand is going to impress. And you look at the hog market, we ran into some very key overhead resistance after having a pretty decent bounce off the early month lows, early May lows. And you say, okay, we're taking pause here, but overall, it still looks like we're going to try to break through that overhead resistance and go higher. I think the setup looks good for that. And then you look at cattle, yeah, we just kind of cooled it off towards the end of the week. Again, there's a lot of question marks on the demand side of things, but look at feeder cattle. Feeder cattle have been in this downward trending channel and have really respected the technicals very closely, for the past couple of months. But we finally on Friday had a follow up to a 2-day rally. We got up and over that key trend line resistance. Feeder cattle look like they want to break out to the upside a little bit. And I'm wondering if that's a bit of a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, for the livestock, for proteins as a whole.
Ted, I know you mentioned crude a little bit too, but we've seen pretty high natural gas prices and heating oil and things of that nature here. And we're watching the fertilizer market come back a little bit. Maybe what are just some general thoughts there, a little more in the energy complex here as we get into the summer months as well?
Yeah, and the fertilizer market coming back a little bit, first of all, is very welcome and needed. But a lot of that's tied into the comments made by President, Russian President Vladimir Putin about exporting fertilizer and nitrogen again. And so, yeah, again, it all comes down to that whole idea of the inflationary bubble bursting, and that will happen, in my opinion, at some point. I just don't think we see it till closer to fall. And when it does, then going into next year planting, I think we're going to be looking at some much less aggressively priced input costs. So, yeah, I'm optimistic on that, but I'm not going to hold my breath, at least not just yet. I think that's more of a fall into winter thing.
Ted, before we run out of time, any final thoughts? Anything else you want to reiterate for us here on this Friday?
I mean, I gotta go back to that crude oil market. I mean, that 120 mark. We're up into new contract high territory, and it makes you really go back to those previous highs just under 150, and you say that's really the big target that we have above us. So, is that going to be a thing? Are we going to see crude run up to that 150 mark? And if we do, I think it'll happen in fairly short order. And what does that mean for everything else? So, I mean, that's more than anything right now. That's the one thing that I'm really watching very closely.
Well, Ted, if producers need some advice with their marketing, working through these volatile markets, I know they can reach out to you at Zaner. What's going to be the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach me directly at 312 You can also find us on the web at www.zaner.com. We actually have a new app that is a very helpful tool for producers to put in their positions, both on the cash and futures and option side of things, to give them an overall idea of what their risk management strategy is and help them plan. And then also, if you're interested or if you're on Twitter, I'm at the Ted Spread.
You can find him very easily at the Ted Spread on Twitter, or again, go to Zaner.com to learn more. With that, Ted Seifried with Zaner Ag Hedge. Appreciate the time on this Friday, sir. Have a great weekend.
Absolutely, Jesse. You do the same, man. Always a pleasure.
Ted Seifried joining us today here on Market Talk, brought to you by our friends at Growmark FS. That's going to do it for the show on this Friday. Find us online, markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.